So I'm Hallie Evans. I'm so excited to be here with my friend and colleague, Larry Hornsby. Welcome.
It's good to be here and good to be a part of this, Hallie.
Yeah, and those of you that know us, we could talk for hours, and we just might. We have a lot of laughs together. But we're going to talk about two things that we both love, economics and education. And Larry just told me right before we got on here that the first two commissions in anesthesia were education and the Commission on Anesthesia, Economics, and Reimbursement, and that you chaired that committee.
Absolutely. It was really a game changer for our profession at that point, Hallie, because prior to that, even the ANA would not approve a lecture for CE credits on the business of anesthesia because it was not clinical. It didn't meet the requirements. So I was in that business meeting that year, and a member from Seattle, Washington, went to the microphone and made basically a proposal that we form a commission on something to do with business. And so it started kind of working, and as you might imagine, there was debate taking place in there. And so it came to a vote, and the membership voted, I don't remember if it was unanimous, but it was overwhelming to move forward. And so we developed the Commission on Anesthesia, Economics, and Reimbursement, and that was in 2007. I had no idea that I would be asked to chair it, and so I left the meeting not knowing that I would be selected as the chair of the commission. But there's only been two commissions in the history of the ANA. The first was in 1982, and it was the Commission on Anesthesia Education, and Sandra Ouellette-Marie chaired that commission. And so it was not something that was expected to come from that business meeting, but because it came from the business meeting and was voted on by the membership, it had to happen. So fast forward, when we formed the commission and we were looking for experts from the CRNA community, but also we were looking for people that had an influence in Washington. And it was one of the highlights of my career. We had President Clinton was, as you remember, Hillary Care, and was very, very involved in making some proposals for health care. I was ANA president during that time. I met personally with President Clinton 3 times and many other times at rope lines and those sorts of events. But his director of Health and Human Services, what we know as Medicare now, was actually on the commission. And then we had President Bush's current at that point in time, director of Medicare on the commission. So, I can tell you that when I was ANA president, I would have killed for 10 minutes to be with that director of Medicare. And I did meet with him several times over discussing the supervision and removing the federal requirement for supervision for nurse anesthetists. And so, but having them on the commission, and of course, we are still bound by some things there that were said during the meeting that we can't talk about. But the commission put together recommendations that had to go to the board and had to be, by mandate, reported out to the membership at the following annual meeting. And so one of those recommendations was, we identified pretty early that a gaping hole in our educational process was that none of us, nor the anesthesiologists, get any business education during our time as anesthesia students. And so you come out of school, you great providers, great clinicians, you intubate a rattlesnake before it can strike, but you don't know how billing works, you don't know how the money gets from the case into the bank account, and so all those things were kind of missing. And so one of the recommendations was it was mandated that the Council on Accreditation require certain number of hours on the business of anesthesia. Well, that also pushed the button. If it was going to be good for the students, we had to approve continuing education for business talks and business lectures.
What year was that? Was that all in 2007?
So, as best as I can remember, the annual meeting was in August of 2007, and then the next year was the report out, and the board voted to approve the.
Okay. Because I was going to say, I graduated in 2008, and I can't remember getting business.
Right.
Yeah.
None of us did.
Yeah.
None of us did.
Okay, so I was right on the.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so that's when things changed. And the commission, we had open discussions about how CRNAs were being left out of the request for proposal process. No CRNA was doing proposals for contracts, and so it was something that I had done in my business life and was growing my business at that point in time. But this was really the first thing that really changed the vision for how our students would be educated, existing CRNAs. And I've personally seen this in action now with teaching the business of anesthesia for so many years, along with Dr. Juan Quintana. And it's been a real honor and a privilege to see the CRNA community embrace business topics and be proactive and want to gain knowledge in that area.
Yeah. We have even a professor here, Dr. Hogue, who got her doctorate with an MBA. It's been so interesting in I teach in the doctorate completion program. That's where I am, and you teach the business course there. Just to see the shift of interest in that course. You know, it was always a course in the program, but over the last couple of years, it's people's favorite course. You know, you've been in business of anesthesia so long, but when do you think this really surge of interest of wanting to know everything about the business interest got recharged? You know, because we see it. When I graduated, I had friends that wanted to bill for themselves, and it was very important, and they would calculate how much money people were making off of us versus if you billed yourself. But now, I mean, more than ever, people want to know what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things there. I started my first company in 1991 in Montgomery, Alabama, and I'm just going to tell you, I made every mistake in the book. If I made a new mistake, I would have to invent it because I made them all. And I didn't know anything about the business of anesthesia. I was a little bit thrust into it, but it was something that I wanted to do and I had considered doing, but I never really thought I'd have the opportunity to do that as a CRNA business person. And boy, was I wrong. It started growing, and that business grew and grew and grew, and I learned by making mistakes. I learned from trial and error because there still was really nothing to read. This predated my ability to search the internet and Google it, So I've been a part of the growth of this, and it just became a natural, let's pay back. And so that's how I started lecturing about the business of anesthesia. People expressed an interest, and I would get calls primarily from state associations that had a conference coming up, and they said, we're getting a lot of requests for the business of anesthesia, and we don't know anybody else that can lecture on it. And so that's how I really started bumping into Juan Quintana, is he would be at the same meeting, and he would be doing a lecture on the business of anesthesia, and I would be doing an hour or two on the business of anesthesia. But you really, Hallie, as an educator, it's really impossible to teach anything in an hour or two in front of an audience. I mean, you scratch the surface. That's all you can do. And so I think there was some part of that people, CRNAs, started saying, I want to know more. I want to learn more. And so that's how I kind of migrated into teaching these 8-hour courses at the program level for SRNAs to to embrace the business of anesthesia, and then from there became the CRNA entrepreneurs of the world that wanted more and more and more to do it, and learning how to make a proposal for a facility contract, and those things that you just don't wake up one morning and know how to do. And so it's it's been a blessing. I've enjoyed my career. I've enjoyed my clinical anesthesia experiences, but nothing lights me up more than talking about the business of anesthesia. You know, so it's been a great ride, and I'm delighted now to be a part of the Middle Tennessee School of Anesthesia and the program director of the Hornsby Business Institute. I mean, I had no idea that this was going to happen, or that they would name the program for me. That was quite a surprise. Yeah. But I am honored. But there's also a part of me that wants to make it the greatest business program going out there. It's got my name on it, you know, so it's got to be good.
Yeah, I have no doubt that it will be. Yeah. But there's something to be said. Anyone can pick up a textbook, right, about starting a business, but to get the lessons from someone who's lived it from the ground up, and like you said, made every mistake that could be made, is so much more meaningful than just going to take business courses. In general, not even specific to anesthesia. And you bring up something else that I find, even I used to lecture across the whole anesthesia curriculum, and it's true. You have, maybe even if you have 2 hours, you take 5 minutes to get settled, you have a 10-minute break in the middle, and then questions at the end, and there's so much material to get through. And you want to do interesting things, you want to flip the classroom and work on case studies and let people be creative in their learning. But, you end up so often just having to lecture and squeeze in material. So I have found myself doing the same thing, creating these workshops and extra things where we can do these hands-on practice and get creative with how we're learning. So I think it's really interesting how you're now integrating the education with the business and trying.
Well, and it is interesting. You're a real educator. I don't consider myself an educator at all. Even though I'm a part of this wonderful school, but you do things that I can never do, but when I lecture about the business of anesthesia, it's not from a research article. Yeah. It's not from anything speculative. It's on things that I've experienced since 1991. Yeah. And so I, people accuse me of telling a lot of stories in my lectures and all, and I'll digress and move over and say, well, let me tell you about this time. Let me tell you about what happened here. But all of those things really come together in a very interesting fashion to teach, and I enjoy teaching the business of anesthesia, but. I don't have a doctorate. I don't have a master's degree. I have 2 baccalaureate degrees. I have my baccalaureate of science in nursing and a BS for my anesthesia program. so it's the probably the only place in America that would let me be a program director is the Middle Tennessee School of Anesthesia, and so so I have a great deal of respect for the education process, and I have to say I am learning a lot. Yeah. And it's some of it I like and some of it I don't like. You know, so it's much easier to shoot the video and put out an 8-hour course and then have the discussion board and the questions and that sort of thing than it is to be involved in the intricate details of being a real educator and a real program director.
We were talking about this on the last podcast. You have to want to teach, to be here. When I started teaching, I was young and sweet, I like to say, and I did a post-master's doctorate, so I worked for a while, but I had just had my twins, and and I only did it because I had fear of missing out, and my chief CRNA, they were doing it, they were offering the doctorate free for clinical preceptors. And he said, Hallie, let's just do it. Why wouldn't we do this? I'm like, well, I wouldn't do it because I have twins at home. I work full time. You know, life is stressful. And then he's like, well, I'm going to do it. And I was like, okay, then I have to do this, you know? And even when I went to the interview, the assistant program director, who actually didn't stay on when I did the program, he's like, well, what are you doing here? You know, when he asked about myself. And I'm like, well, I'm here.
Right.
So that was my first eye-opening, you know, to education, that, you know, it's going to be busy. School was busy enough. And then when that school actually ended up hiring me to teach. And that's really the point. And when I got there, I thought I was a sure thing because the anesthesia department recruited me. You know, I thought I was just going through the formalities. We talked about this a little bit earlier, being within a nursing school. We talked about that off camera. And so I'm cruising, I give my little presentation, and then the next step is the interview with the dean.
Right.
And I waited, I think, 2 hours for her or something crazy. And then, you know, walks in, doesn't look up to say hi to me or anything, just looking through. So, Hallie, what makes you think you can teach? And, you know, I'm sweet and young at that time. And, well, I teach clinically, and I've given a few guest lectures, and, clinically I get good reviews. And what makes you think you can teach?
Yeah.
I don't know, you know, I'm willing to learn. And that was the right answer for her. And so that lady sent me to the Center of Teaching Excellence for every course. And it is, you know, eye-opening, all the stuff behind the scenes. You can know everything about anesthesia, but you can know nothing about education.
Right.
And it was eye-opening for me. That first year was rough because it wasn't just about the teaching. It was about how you're presenting yourself. Are the students getting it? Are they feeling engaged? Are they on their phones? Are they paying attention to you? Are you on this committee to fulfill your role to get your next level? Are you doing enough scholarship? Are you doing enough service? You know, are you counseling the students? Are you advising them? All this other stuff that no one told me I was going to have to do all this. You know, they told me, oh, come in, you'll teach 2 classes and do sim. I said, that sounds like a dream.
Yeah.
And there is just so much more to it. And I feel the same. I wouldn't want to be anywhere but MTSA. I have taught other places, and this is just a great environment to teach in.
So what do you like most, and what do you hate most about your educator role?
Well, right now, I always like to have to say, I taught before there were doctorate projects, but I do like to see, and I was not a proponent for turning this into a doctorate degree, or, you know, if we weren't going to do it separately. I like that I direct the postmaster's program because I get experienced CRNAs. So coming back around, I do like to see those projects from beginning to completion. I think I'm really proud of the projects we complete here at MTSA. And so I know the students hate me along the way. I know they get mad at me and irritated, but just to see how proud they are when we go to conferences or they get publications at the end of the process makes me okay with them being mad at me along the way. That look on their face and how proud they are of their accomplishment makes it all worth it to me. And honestly, if I realize they don't hate me forever, because I have had so many now come back from the completion program to do the nurse educator track. So they quickly forget and they like me again. But that is it, you know? And when I was teaching across the anesthesia curriculum, my favorite thing was just I am very patient. Many people don't know this about me, but my first bachelor's was in psychology. And I think that's why I have twins, just very, very patient. So I often worked clinically with the students that were struggling. I was the person that they would pair them with, and nothing would make me happier than to see them succeed, you know? So that was my other favorite thing. You know, there were some that just weren't gonna get it, of course, but when I knew someone just had it in them and we could bring it out and make it all come together for them, that was a great feeling as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You know, I kind of have a similar feelings about when I was initially lecturing at the state association conferences and the for-profit conferences out there. If you can imagine doing, there was one conference or two that I did like a 6-hour block of business of anesthesia. But if you can imagine in that audience, over on the far left, you got a group of students, adult learners,
Yeah.
that, I mean, there's CRNAs and there are SRNAs in that mix. But it doesn't really matter. You got, on the left side of the room, you got people that don't know anything about the business of anesthesia, never experienced it, never talked about it, have received little or no education in it. Middle of the room, you got those people that know a little bit about it, they understand a little bit about billing, but they can't put it all together.
Yeah.
And then over on the right side of the room, you got the CRNA entrepreneurs sitting there. And they could probably be teaching some of those courses, but they're there looking for one or two little pearls that they hadn't thought about.
Yeah.
And so it was gratifying to be able to help move each of those groups of people. But at the same time, what I hated about that is recognizing that I couldn't really teach them the business of anesthesia in that environment.
Yeah.
And so fast forward now to being able to offer a video-based product out there that, one, the entry level is designed just for what it says. Yeah. It's the entry level BSN to DNP, DNAP students. And I'm not going to say it's a lower level, but it's not as deep into the weeds as what I would offer in the next level course that's designed more for CRNAs that are either an entrepreneurial spirit and they think they want to start a business, but I would take them to that level in that course. And so it's a much deeper dive into business, and it's not for everybody. I mean, you've got to want to do that. But I share the same exact thing that you just said. It's like seeing these students morph from not knowing anything or very little about the business of anesthesia to completing an RFP project, and all of a sudden you get the feedback from them, and it's like, wow, I never expected that I could get here. And they come in and they don't know how to set up the formulas to calculate expenses, how to set up the formulas to calculate revenue, and all of a sudden in 8 weeks they've done it.
Yeah.
And and so that's the piece that really lights me up about this. But really and truly, it's a little bit of a personal thing to be able to give back what I learned by the school of hard knocks and not knowing and making mistakes. But I will tell you, I don't mind telling you, I never made the same mistake twice.
That's good.
I learned every time I got that arrow through the heart. I learned from it. I pulled the arrow out and I moved on,
I think it's important though, when we can admit our mistakes and learn and grow from them, it's same thing with CRNAs in practice. If you can't admit your mistakes, those are the scary.
Absolutely.
So, there's always value in that. Yep. You mentioned how you had the couple, CRNAs that were just looking for one or two perks. We held the nurse educator first mini conference a couple months ago, and I had one extremely experienced nurse educator sign up for it. So much that when I saw her name, I thought, is this for real? And so she came and I saw her taking notes, and I thought, oh my goodness, this is the best feeling. I am sharing something that either she knows and is just reminding herself of, or something new. And it was a great feeling because there were very novice instructors there, crazily taking notes, but she was still learning something or getting something out of it. So I was really happy with that. So your courses, you guys are offering them to universities,
Right.
and then you are still currently involved in the process, or the university can help teach the course. Is that?
Well, that's the long-standing plan. Right now, it's still I'm doing the teaching and the evaluations and those sorts of things. But that is part of the ongoing process, is to move it more to where there can be like a faculty handbook, and the faculty can participate in the teaching process or in the discussion board process or whatever. But right now, the product that's out, that's active currently, is the entry level BSN to DNP DNAP program. But I'm working now to develop the next level, which will be more designed for the CRNA entrepreneurial market. Now, I had an interesting course. This first class that we had was a combination of entry-level students and a mix of completion students that were CRNAs coming back.
Yeah.
I wasn't exactly prepared for that when I learned that there were 2 CRNAs in the completion program. And I have a seminar company called LACES, Lower Alabama Continuing Education Seminars, and I just had in September one of those students lecture at my conference on the business of anesthesia.
Oh, how funny.
And I look I see this guy pop up on the camera.
That's so funny.
And I'm sitting there looking, I go, oh my God, this guy could teach this.
Why didn't
So that was a very interesting thing, that he was, although he is very accomplished in the business of anesthesia, and there's another student in there, I would say equally, but doesn't go out around the country lecturing on the business of anesthesia, but is very, very much a business entrepreneurial minded CRNA. And here they are in an entry level course, and I'm like, golly, but they've both given me good evaluations for it, you know. So anyway, but it's kind of like you just never know what you're going to experience in that, and so. But it has motivated me to go back now to that entry-level course.
And realize there's a need.
And beef it up a little bit. And maybe put a little more meat on the bone for those completion students that are looking for a little more than an entry-level course.
Yeah. So. One other thing we talked about before we started the podcast was, businesses have a structure and education has a structure. And I mentioned it a little bit with the School of Nursing and the dean, but how is that, and MTSA, is not within a School of Nursing, but how has that transition been for you? Because it is structured differently than a business. It's its own little political environment almost in a school. MTSA, not as much as other schools.
Well, to be honest with you, I probably would have not agreed to do what I'm doing now with the Hornsby Business Institute at other universities because of the politics involved and that sort of thing. And not only that, but it probably wouldn't have been ever offered to me because of my lack of a doctorate degree. So it just kind of worked. It kind of fit, and I've been lecturing at MTSA probably for about 10 years now, teaching the business of anesthesia, even prior to the video module course that we offer today. But so I've had a long-standing relationship. I like the people here. I like the community. It's just a different environment.
Yeah.
And so this was a pretty good place to be for a guy with a lot of white hair on the top, and now 4 little grandsons here.
Number 4 came.
Number 4 is here now. So it's quite an experience. And so it's kind of a great way to continue to give back to the profession, but at the same time kind of start winding down my professional things. But anyway, I absolutely love it. But my goal here is to produce a very high quality product and then hand it off to the next generation and say, somebody else carry the baton.
So you know what's funny is, in a different way, my goal is to produce a very high quality product of nurse educators and hand them off to the next generation of SRNAs. And, you know, I tell the nurse educator students, nurse anesthesia educator students, that we are the gatekeepers. You know, we are the ones that are going to train the SRNAs and keep this profession elevated and to the high standards that it's known for in the nursing community. And that's just so important to me, to just develop good educators. We can all become good clinicians, you know, if we make it through anesthesia school and stay up to date in our skills and our practice and our knowledge. But you know, then you have to learn everything with education to master that skill too. So I am really committed to putting out quality educators in the way that you are handing off the business knowledge. You know, that's what I'm.
Well, and if you look at how far we've come as a profession, both in education and the business side. I mean, you go back and you look. The first commission was 1982 on education, and I started my first business in 91. But it took from 91 to 2007 for our professional association to recognize there's a hole in the net here. There's something lacking. We got to be teaching this because it was true. It was absolutely true that CRNAs were getting left out of the boardrooms.
Yeah.
And everybody wanted to know why. Well, there's several reasons, but one of the glaring reasons was CRNAs didn't know enough. There were opportunities. There would be they would find out that their contract was up for transition, and they usually found out after the fact. But in reality, they didn't understand the basics of putting together a proposal.
Yeah.
And having the knowledge to do the modeling. How are we going to be 4-to-1? We're going to have anesthesiologists. We're going to be CRNA only. You know, what are we going to do? And so that basic knowledge there, and then I would say some degree the fear of the unknown. Well, gosh, are we going to have to get a line of credit? Or I'm not going to go into debt to start this company, and that's the reality of the monster out there. Is because we make really good salaries, and because CRNAs are really good at what they do. It's not an easy thing to come up and look and say, well, I'm going to need 20 CRNAs to staff this place, and the CRNAs are making X number of dollars. Oh my God, where's that money going to come from?
Yeah.
You know, so it is a little bit of a staggering piece of reality when you don't know how to do it. And so I think this course and my past in teaching this is really designed to give the CRNA the confidence that we can do this, guys. Yeah. And I encourage all the groups, if that happens at their facility, for them to get together at somebody's house off campus and start talking about it.
Yeah.
And develop a plan. And hopefully somebody in that group of CRNAs will say, I know how to do this.
Right.
Let's do it. And so let's go for it. And so they run the numbers, they look at it, they are prepared to go into a boardroom, even though they may have never done it. They walk in there and they do a presentation. So that's kind of the end result that makes me light up.
Yeah.
You know? So
that's great. All right, well, Larry and I will both be at ADCE this year.
Oh, looking forward to it. Looking forward to it.
We'll have a booth there, MTSA. Stop by and talk to us anytime. We'd love to meet and greet and get to know you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.